How you doing, Tanya? Thank you for coming in today. And I want to thank you for coming in and telling your story for us. And first thing I want to know is, so how was your childhood? Tell me about yourself, a little bit about yourself.
Um, my childhood was, I was a very introverted child. I grew up with two brothers. Um, and so I was very quiet, uh, kind of shy, timid, kind of stayed to myself. But I was into teaching and doing hair at a very young age.
Okay. And you and your brothers were y'all pretty close?
Yeah,
Pretty close. Y'all
very
had a good,
close.
you know, a lot of fun times together as a child.
Yes, and I took a lot of beatings for them as well.
Okay, now, uh, so how did you feel when you found out that you was pregnant?
I was excited. I had been pregnant before, and I lost that child, so there was some kind of fear that I wouldn't be able to carry this particular child as well.
Mm.
So there was a fear, but I was excited about um, having a baby.
Okay, okay. So what was the date that he came into, existence?
He was born July 11, 1996 at 2:05 in the morning.
Ooh. Now, so how would you describe Tariq as a baby?
Loving. Uh, he wasn't like most kids that would climb in on the table or take things off the table into cabinets. He was very different. But at the same time, he wasn't one who cried a lot unless he was hungry. He loved to play, he loved to smile, laugh. So he was a very, very good baby.
Okay. Now, what about when he started getting a little older, and you know how boys can be into everything, and as he got older as a teenager, how was it?
He didn't talk until he was around almost 2 years old. They thought maybe he was deaf. I took him to do some testing and stuff. He was very different, but like I said, a loving child. He pretty much was into Marvel characters. He was into video games at the age of 5, and he pretty much was to himself. A lot of people said I sheltered him. I wouldn't allow him to go out and be this type of person, but that was just like what he wanted to do. He liked to stay in. He liked to, work on computers. He was very into reading books at a young age, and so I just allowed him to be himself. Not that I sheltered him, but I allowed him to be himself.
Okay. And how would you describe his personality? Was he real funny? Was he?
Yes, fun and comical. He loved people, never met a stranger. If was anything he could do for anyone, he was there without asking. If he would see somebody coming up with groceries or something, he would automatically, go to him, help. Even as a child, when I used to put him in the shopping cart in the grocery store, he always just spoke to everyone that came past us. But he just had a very loving soul for people. He loved people.
Okay, great. Now, tell me about his education and how he ended up in Maryland.
His education was once he finished middle school, he applied for the Wilson Early College, and he was accepted into that. And so that was a 5-year program, but he finished in 4. And so when he went off to college at North Carolina A&T, but he only did a year and a semester, and he was able to finish early because he already had an associate's degree when he left Wilson Early College. Upon graduation, he did some interviews when they came for a job fair, and he was offered a job at Northrop Grumman, and they're located in 50 states, but the location that they chose for him was in Maryland.
Okay. Now we're about to get into it.
Okay.
So, tell me about what you know that happened to your son. Everything that you know about it.
Well, he was threatened in February of 2019 by what was his neighbor. When he was first threatened, he didn't know who this man was. He was taking the trash out, and he kept feeling someone and watching him. And he looked back and the man was standing at the front of the apartment complex. And so when he went back into the apartment complex, the man was standing at the top of the steps and he gave him the throat cut gesture and he told him, "You knew this day was coming." Immediately, my son backed out of the building, called me, and let me know what was going on. I told him to call the police. At this time, we did not know that this was the man that stayed above him. But after they figured it out or whatever, they told him to go down to the police department and to take out um, a restraining order,
Okay.
a protection order.
A protection order. Okay. And this was in February.
February of 2019.
Okay. So what happened after that? Did they do police do the protection order?
He went to police and he had to go to court. When he went to court, his protection order was denied by a judge. And so he went to his apartment complex and um, asked to be moved or asked to be taken out of his lease, in which he could not break his lease. But the very next weekend, he had already started looking for apartments. That, as a mother, told me that he was afraid because he had to walk past this man's apartment, to get to his apartment. And so I knew that there was some fear, but just didn't read a lot into it.
Mm. So can you take me on that night uh, that he actually was killed by his neighbor?
Well, that morning, well, the day before on that Sunday, we had talked. He told me he wanted to tell me about a dream, and in his dream, he told me that there were just flowers everywhere, beautiful flowers. And it was more to the dream, but I just can't remember it all. But we talked that Sunday, and um, up until I think around 10 o'clock that night, he had went out to Walmart, called me, and we had talked, said I love you or whatever. So the next morning, we always text each other, have a good day or whatever. And so that morning, I texted him before going into work, and I told him, Tariq, have a marvelous Monday. I love you. And I went on into work, not even realizing that he never responded. So um, the day went by, and when I got off of work, I started to get myself together for bed. And the supervisor from my job called and said that there was a shooting where my son stayed, and had I spoken with him. And I told her, no, I text him. I said, but he never texts back. And so I began to call. I began to FaceTime him. I began to text him, and there was no answer. And so then at this point, um, I called the police department to find out if it was indeed, true, and trying to locate him.
So you decided to call the police?
So I called the police department, and they kept sending me to a voicemail. And so I realized that I had a friend in Maryland who TJ would call to find out about different barbershops and different things. And so I called him, and I asked him would he go over to check and see if he could find my son. And so he called me, and he said, Tanya, there's police cars everywhere. He said, I'm trying to get up to the front so that I can see if I can find your son. I see his car. And so he ended up calling me back, but he hung up. And so I called him back, and he said, are you home alone? And I said, yes. I said, I know you found my son. I said, stop playing. Where is he? And he said, are you home alone? And I said, yes. He said, Tanya, go to the police department. And at that moment, I lost it, because at that point, I knew that it was indeed my son. And so I ran out of my apartment. I started kicking the apartment doors that were around me, and I guess I passed out at that point.
Mm. I can't even imagine. Now, so your first initial feelings were just, I can't even imagine like how you can get a phone call or get some information like that. Uh, so your first, you would say your first initial reaction maybe was shock that made you pass out, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think it was. I went into shock, and I just lost it. I mean, I lost it. It was just like my world came tumbling down, and so I lost it. I did.
So, how do you grieve and recover from something so devastating?
Um, Grieving is a process, a journey. That's something that I would do until I take my last breath. But as I was grieving, um, I wanted to find help for me. I know in the African American culture, a lot of people tend to not grieve. They kind of sweep it all under the rug and really don't deal with it, and it comes out in different behaviors. And so I'm one that I'm very inquisitive about something that I go through, and I want to learn about it, any little thing. And so I began to Google places that I could possibly, get help. And I was sad to find out that in Wilson, only one church offered assistance with grief, and so that caused me to want to be able to find out more about grief so that I can take it to different churches because I just feel like people don't properly grieve. They are more quiet about their grief, and so it became a burden on my heart. And I wanted to learn and educate myself, and so I found a program where I became a grief coach, and then this was during COVID, so I did it online, and so I was certified as a grief coach. I did go to Peace Church for their grief share program, and any program that I could find online, I was in it. Um,
Okay.
so that's how I, began my process.
Okay. Now I want to talk about because from what I understand, you have a foundation, and I would take this as kind of how you're honoring his memory. So I want you to go into a little bit about the foundation and things that you've been doing, such as your book and things of that nature.
Well, I wanted to do something in his memory, in a conversation that we had began to have before he passed, about giving back. He always wanted to give back, and so he said he wanted to start by giving back at his high school, Wilson Early College. And so I thought about that, and I said, well, why not form a foundation so that I can give back to some of those students? And so I started it the first year and gave back to two students, and I've done that ever since 2019. I've given to, I think, a total of 7 students at Wilson Early College within the past 3 years. And so that's something that's going to be ongoing. And I want to make it even bigger so that I can give more to some of the students, because being a single parent and putting my son through school was a struggle for me. I worked 2 jobs to make sure that he had everything that he needed. So I know it's not geared towards just single parents, but those who are in need. I look at the GPAs, I look at are they involved in the community, because those are some of the things that he was into.
Okay. And what's the name of the foundation?
The Tariq Hudson Legacy of Love Foundation.
Okay, great, great. So I understand that you wrote a book, and on this channel we will display where people can actually donate to the foundation.
Yes, they can donate to the foundation through Cash App. I have PayPal, and also I have a PO box where
Okay.
that can be
But we'll
given.
put some links where they can donate. And tell me a little bit about your book.
This book was pretty much just inspired. I wanted to kind of give um, my story of when Tyreek was born up into his death. It's a great read. It wouldn't take you long. It's not a very long book, but it talks about when he was born and, like I said, up until the time that he passed. And I wanted this to be special, so I released this on the 15th anniversary date of his passing. And it's just a journey of a mother's love. It talks about our bond and him growing up and as a mother, what things we went through.
Okay, great, great. Now, it seemed like you had a good relationship, a great relationship. Uh, is there anything that you wish you had said to him before he was killed?
Well, I ended the conversation on Sunday night with "I love you,"
Okay.
in which that's something that we never got off the phone with or never ended a text without saying "I love you." So if I could have said anything, it would been "I love you."
Okay, great, great. Now this is the last question. Uh, if you could say anything to your son's killer, what would you say to him, and have you forgiven him?
Um, I don't have any words for him, so I can't say that I have, words to say to him. And at this point right now, I haven't forgiven him. That's going to be a process for me. I know that I have to forgive, but I'm just not ready to forgive at this point because he took the one thing that kept me going, that gave me life. And so there are no words that I have for him.
Okay, great. Well, Tanya, we thank you for coming in and telling your story. Really appreciate you. Uh, we hope that this will help other people in their grieving process, and we thank you for coming in and sharing your story to help other people and to help kids and do what you're doing with your foundation. We really appreciate everything that you're doing. You know, us as a community, we do have your back, and like I say, you know, we love you, we care about you, and we're sorry that this happened to you. But we thank you for sharing your story and trying to help other people and helping other kids. And we thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Right.
TJ.